Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Coole McDoolie podcast. I'm Billy Galane here with Colby Spitz. And today we are going to be talking about our top 15 movies of 2017. So, how you doing, Colby?
Not too bad. How are you, sir?
I'm pretty good, Semester just started back up, but I'm good.
I feel that.
How'd your list go, man?
Well, as I was doing it, I narrowed it down to 20. 20 was pretty easy for me. But after you get to 20, narrowing it down, it just, that's where it starts to get difficult.
Yeah, I will say we were going to originally do 10, but we both couldn't narrow it down to 10. So we decided to go with 15 because we're overachievers, I guess. Do you want to just do, you do one, I'll do one, you do one, I'll do one?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
All right, so go ahead then with your number 15, I guess, whenever you're ready, man.
All right, so my number 15 is the country boy heist film Logan Lucky.
Ooh, okay.
The Channing Tatum, you got Daniel Craig in it, Adam Driver.
Absolutely.
It was a movie that I didn't really expect to like. I went into it. I've never seen any of the Ocean's movies. I've never been a big heist guy anyway. But something about this one, I don't know if it's that Southern charm or you call it what you will, but man, that's a good movie.
It's a great heist movie. I really like all the characters and all the cast. It's a fantastic cast. It's filled. It's got Adam Driver, as you said, Daniel Craig, Channing Tatum, Katie Holmes is in it, I believe. Hilary Swank. It's a loaded cast, and they all, I think, deliver. I'm a heist movie fan. I did see the Ocean's movies. I liked 2 out of the 3. The middle one's but overall, Logan Lucky was a solid heist film. I have no complaints with it, really.
Yeah, I mean, something about it balanced its comedy with it really well. So it knew what it was and didn't take it too seriously any of the time. But it also was respectable enough as what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Absolutely. Anything else to add on to that, man?
I think that's it.
All right. Well, then I'll give you my number 15. So my number 15 movie is a movie called Star Wars: The Last Jedi.
Oh God. Okay.
I don't know. I had to put this on my list somehow. I have a lot of problems with this movie, no doubt, but I did thoroughly enjoy it. Every time I saw it. The problems are what prevented from going to 15. But overall, I think there was plenty of fun moments, exciting moments, great sequences that I felt like I enjoyed this film overall. So I have it on the very back of my list at number 15.
Okay, yeah, I mean, people can say what they will about it, but undoubtedly it was one of Carrie Fisher's better performances. And for it to come out posthumously, it just says a lot about the franchise for me, the way they portrayed her.
Yeah, I really loved Carrie Fisher in this movie. The story I enjoyed the most, and the story that I thought, I guess we should say, I don't really think this matters, but these movies, there's going to be spoilers.
Oh yeah.
Maybe we'll try to keep this best we can, but there will be spoilers for these movies. The stuff they did with Luke Skywalker, I thought Mark Hamill was fantastic in this movie. I loved what they did with Luke and Rey on the island. I thought that was the best stuff in this film. I'm not going to get into too much of the problems because I could literally talk about the problems in this movie for about 2 hours if I really wanted to. So Star Wars: The Last Jedi, that's my number 15 movie. So
I will say, the first time I saw it, I didn't like it very much. I did go back a second time because my expectations were so high, and it was very much on. I was expecting the whole.
I had the highest expectations for this year. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. But I went in expecting the whole Luke goes to the dark side kind of thing that they were playing in the trailers.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I watched it the first time and got those expectations put away, I went in. I really did enjoy it. I respected what Rian Johnson was going for. Didn't agree with all of it, but I respected it.
Yeah, see, I had the complete opposite thing. The first time I saw it, I walked out of that theater very, very happy. I loved this film. I saw it a second time, and I saw it a third time, and each time I saw it, I found more and more problems with it. I'm like, well, that doesn't really make sense. I don't know how that works. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed that film, and I have it at number 15 on my list. So.
All right. For number 14 for me, we are looking at the Tommy Wiseau-based comedy. James Franco directed The Disaster Artist.
Yeah.
Now, the first time I came out of this movie, I just had a big smile on my face. I was laughing a whole lot. Second time, some of it got a little old, but I will say I did laugh a lot, and I really enjoyed this one. James Franco as Tommy Wiseau. He nailed the voice. He nailed the look. He just had it. He had it right.
Yeah. What I say is I'm actually supposed to watch The Disaster Artist after this podcast ends. I know it's a little poor timing on that, but I watched The Room earlier today in preparation, and I'm excited to see The Disaster Artist after I saw that movie. That movie is so bad that you can't help but love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I can't really give you much thought on The Disaster Artist, but yeah, I'm excited to see it, and I'm looking forward to it.
The one thing that I will say is Dave Franco playing Greg Sestero. I didn't like it very much. I think it's because Dave Franco seems like he's just Dave Franco playing a role.
I feel like that's how he always feels, though.
Right, and that's, I mean, maybe it's a little biased that I'm just not the biggest Dave Franco fan.
My number 14, I have a movie based on a Stephen King novel. I have It.
Oh, boy.
I'm assuming you don't sound like you agree with that very much.
See, at first, I've seen it 3-4 times now. This was one of the movies I was so excited for, pretty much since 2015 when I heard about it. And then, you start to see the pictures of Pennywise. And then, you get little bits here and there. I was really excited. And I didn't walk out disappointed, but the whole thing just felt like Stand By Me or a little bit like Stranger Things. A lot of people are just saying it's Stranger Things with a scary clown.
I mean, what is it? The main kid one of the main kids from Stranger Things is in this movie.
Yeah.
Finn Wolfhard.
Yeah.
So I mean, I can see that because it had the whole '80s thing going on for it as well. But the reason, I mean, I'm not going to say this is like a masterpiece at all or anything. I found the movie entertaining. I'm not a huge horror movie fan, so the fact that I even went to see this in theaters says a lot for the marketing. I really was looking forward to watching this movie. And I really appreciated the fact that I felt like it was made with a lot of heart. One thing that I feel like a modern horror, at least, is you don't necessarily see that much heart in horror movies now. It's a lot of just jump scares and let's get them to scream or jump, And this movie, while it does that at times, I feel like it's almost a horror movie second and a coming of age story first. And I really respected how they melded those two elements together in this film. So I have it at number 14.
I will say that one has potential to go up on my list once I see Chapter 2 and it kind of wraps everything together. If they get Chapter 2 right, even if it's just the same as this, but it ends the story the way I want, then I could easily see it going up on my favorites. And hey, I will say this, that's not going to be the only Stephen King movie we talk about today.
Ooh, okay.
All right. So,
what you got as your next movie?
My number 13, we're looking at War for the Planet of the Apes.
Ooh, okay. All right.
It really tied together. Not only was this movie wonderful, but it brought the other two. It just cohesively ended it for one of my favorite trilogies of all time. This, even though it's not so much of a war film as it's about politics or camaraderie or say what you will, Woody Harrelson puts on a great performance, and Andy Serkis is always wonderful with it. He's the god of motion capture.
He really is, man. I feel like it's very rare you see him in a non-motion capture role.
Absolutely.
I feel like that's like he's the greatest actor who nobody knows like what he looks like.
I think that's the best way to put it.
But yeah, I definitely enjoyed this movie. It will probably show up at some point on my list. So yeah, I'm not gonna say too much about it, but I thoroughly enjoyed this movie.
All right, what do you got at number 13?
Wonderful drama, Lady Bird. I have that at my number 13.
Okay, that was one of the movies I was close to putting up there. Logan Lucky just edged it out.
Yeah, this movie for me was I don't know. I feel like I wanted to put it higher, but I just couldn't. I mean, I liked it. I liked what they did. I really, really enjoyed the characters, the performances in this movie, and I really enjoyed everything about it. But It didn't, I don't think, hit with me as hard as some of these other movies did, or stay with me as hard as some of these other movies did. So
Absolutely.
I didn't put it terribly high up on my list. I have it at number 13, but it's a great movie, and it's deserving of all the accolades it's getting or it will get at the Oscars.
The main character, I don't want to try and pronounce her name. I know I'll get it wrong.
The character, the
The
actress,
actress,
it's like Sayor something.
Saoirse Ronan, I think is how you say it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but regardless, she was wonderful. She was, I mean, the scene where you see her jumping out of the car, I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's gonna be up there with the Ferris Bueller moments, and just some of those classic coming of age scenes that you just see everywhere. They become iconic. I definitely think that scene and that movie is just one of the better coming of age films you'll see in a while.
Absolutely, it's one of the best. It's one of the better coming of age movies I've seen in a while. Like I said, I have no complaints about this film. It didn't sit with me as hard as much as some of these other films did. So I didn't put it as high as I feel like I want to. I've only seen it once, so maybe that's why.
Right.
But I thoroughly enjoyed it when I saw it.
All right. So we're getting to number 12 for me. I have Jordan Peele's Get Out.
Okay.
Now this
Absolutely.
one I definitely felt should have been higher, but the more that I was sitting there, I was just looking through all of them. I didn't find the right place to put it. It kind of just settled there. It was the last one I wrote in because I didn't know if 12 was right, but this was definitely a good year for movies. But it was a very interesting take on modern horror, on a whole bunch of different levels. It was just very well done. It makes me excited for what Jordan Peele has coming in the future, because
Absolutely.
I heard about Get Out. I was like, this looks pretty good. It could be interesting. I heard Jordan Peele was the one that directed it, and then I kind of just sat and I thought, the Key and Peele guy, right? Is he
Yeah. I had the same reaction.
is he gonna do justice to a horror film? But he certainly did. He made one of the best horror films, easily of the year, of the decade up there. It's definitely up there.
Absolutely, this movie, the fact that it's a horror movie that has significant commentary, I think is one of the best things about it. Yeah, and once again, I didn't know what to expect going into this movie, being a horror movie directed by Jordan Peele, because obviously the only thing I really knew him from was the Key and Peele show. But I was definitely very, very surprised in a good way after watching this film, and I didn't realize I had two horror films on my list. I said I'm not a huge horror person, and here I am. Talking about two horror films that I thoroughly enjoyed this year. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess I have at number 12. I have a movie. I have Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Okay. All
At
right.
number 12. I really really liked what they did with this. The fact that it's something different from a lot of the superhero movies we've been getting. Very much a high school movie. I really love. This is a little different. I love the performances in it. I love Tom Holland as Peter Parker, and Spider-Man. I love Michael Keaton as the Vulture. It was fantastic. The rest of the high school kids, Aunt May. I really enjoyed this movie for what it was. It's another one of those movies though that as much as I enjoyed it, there was so many movies that I enjoyed more or as much. And that's the thing. Like 13 through like 7 or 6, you could realistically put in any order for me.
Yeah.
That was like the hardest thing. This movie was definitely, I think, another solid outing by the MCU. I think probably one of their better films, and I really enjoyed it.
Right. Now I will say that this was definitely in my honorable mentions. I was very close to that one. The thing about it, there were a few things that bugged me about it, but Keaton playing the villain that you could really get behind, and you understood his motives, which is something that Marvel has always gotten reprehended for. And no superhero movie has really nailed it, and I think this was probably their best one. They got the villain perfect in this one. Peter Parker, or Tom Holland, he was funny, he was goofy. I think most kids, at least me in particular, saw themselves in him. You weren't the cool kid, but you were. It wasn't like you were the kid that sat on the ground or in the bathroom eating your lunch. You were just an ordinary kid.
I feel like I saw more of myself in his best friends than I did in him.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, one thing I will say is this is probably my second favorite Spider-Man movie, behind Spider-Man 2.
Sure. Okay.
Which is a high praise. Spider-Man 2 is probably one of my favorite superhero movies ever. Probably, if we ever do a list on that, it'll probably be pretty high up there. Spoiler. But this movie is absolutely, I really enjoyed it. And it made me excited to see Spider-Man in the MCU interacting with all these other characters, which, brings up the fact that Iron Man was in this movie. I really love how they used him in this movie. I was worried at first when I saw the trailers that they would try to just put shoehorn him in there and be like, oh, hey, Iron Man's in this. Don't you guys want to see this? Because he's the guy in the MCU. But I thought the way they used Iron Man and the way, obviously, Robert Downey Jr. is fantastic as Iron Man, but the way they used him was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. They got it right as him being the mentor, not him being the, oh, he's the big Avenger. He's going to save Spider-Man, which he does, but he teaches Spider-Man. He makes him do everything without the high-powered suit. And it really comes together well, in the sense that it makes sense. You're following him and you're kind of growing with him as a hero.
Exactly, yeah.
It's Ferris Bueller meets Marvel, it's just really cool.
Yeah, I really like this take on Spider-Man a lot, and it's definitely a refreshing take on Spider-Man after we got the amazing Spider-Man movies. But yeah, so you got your number 11?
Yeah, so at number 11, I have the thriller, almost kind of crime drama, Wind River.
Okay.
Jeremy Renner, Elizabeth Olsen. That it was just a wonderful movie, in kind of the worst way possible. It was it was wonderful in the worst way.
It was just outside of my top 15.
Okay. You really felt for these characters and everything that happened to them. You kind of felt the character development was phenomenal, I thought. I certainly, the direction of the entire movie just really rolled for me. Coming at the end, there is a title card, and it says a statistic that really just blows your mind. It's all I'll say is I sat through the end credits without saying a word.
Yeah.
And pretty much everyone else sat through the end credits, and it was a dead silence, and you kind of got that feeling in your gut.
Yeah. This movie took me by surprise. When I saw it was was it Jeremy Renner?
Yeah, Jeremy Renner.
And Elizabeth Olsen. I didn't expect this kind of movie from the two of them, especially Jeremy Renner. This was, I think, the best performance I've seen from him.
Easily.
Or one of the best performances I've seen from him.
Easily.
And, I mean, I had a very similar reaction to you at the end of this movie. But I really enjoyed this movie. And like I said, it just missed out on my top 15.
All right, how about you? You got number 11.
My number 11 is your number 12. I have Get Out at my number 11.
Okay.
So we have that pretty similar right there. Like I said, I really enjoyed what Jordan Peele did with this movie, and the way he showed his take or a commentary on race in this country. I really loved what he offered with this movie.
Now, one thing I will say is I found it very interesting that he labeled it as a horror film, because at least for me as I'm watching it, I'm not necessarily scared. I'm just kind of observing what's going on until, the last 10, 20 minutes, things kind of escalate very quickly. But up until then, it's very just a subdued comedy almost.
It's almost not so much like a horror movie. It just almost feels... It gives you a similar feeling, but you're never really scared,
Right.
You get that feeling of almost suspense, but it doesn't, there's no scares per se, almost.
Yeah, it's kind of just the gut feeling that, it's just something's very off about this.
Yeah.
That, but the amount of people from the demographics he was going after that were this is a real fear, not so much people cutting out our heads and putting them in old white people's bodies.
Yeah.
But more of the idea just that, it's not, racism is still such a big thing in this country, and a lot of people identified it, which was not what I expected.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was gonna be a little too weird or a little too funky for a lot of people to get behind.
Yeah, this movie, when I finished watching it, didn't feel like a movie that would be as big as it ended up being. But I'm happy for its success because it's a really well made film and it deserves all the accolades and all the credit it's getting.
And it most definitely makes me excited for Jordan Peele's future as a director.
Oh, absolutely! I can't wait to see what else he's able to direct and do.
All right.
So yeah, what do you have? I guess we're starting to our top 10 now. So yeah, is your number 10?
All right, top 10. I have the most recent Guillermo del Toro, The Shape of Water.
Okay. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't gotten around to seeing that yet. But
Yeah, this one I had to drive like an hour to the next theater just to see this movie. But I will say it was certainly worth it. Del Toro has a way about him.
Yeah.
This is just a beautiful movie. It's funnier than I expected. Like, I found myself laughing. And as awkward of a scenario as the film actually is, a falling in love with a fish creature, it's really uncomfortable. But once you watch it, you go through the process with them as they kind of fall in love with this creature.
Yeah.
Like I said, Andy Serkis is the god of motion capture. I think Doug Jones is the god of playing weird creatures.
About to say.
I don't know what you call it, but
this isn't the first time. But like I said, seeing the trailer for this, I will say I didn't really know what to make of it.
Yeah.
After seeing the trailers for it, it seemed like it could go one of two ways. It could be either really, really good or really, really disappointing.
Right.
And from all I've heard, it seems like it went the right direction. It went. It's a really, really good film, so I can't wait to actually end up seeing it.
See, I wasn't even planning on seeing this film, at least not until it came around closer to my area.
Yeah,
but
that's my thing. So.
I got a recommendation from a friend, and he doesn't typically like this kind of movie. So I went off his word, and I told him. So the two of us went out to see it, and I was in awe. I mean, the colors in the film of itself, it takes you out of this world and puts you in that one. It's a very immersive film.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, I can't recommend that one enough.
Yeah. Okay. So for my number 10 film, I have a film that's on here just as much because of its impact as because of how much I liked it. And that's Wonder Woman.
Okay.
Like I said, I really did enjoy the film until the last 10, 20 minutes maybe.
Sure.
But it's on here because it's an important film. It's an impactful film, no doubt about it. The first major superhero film really to feature a freaking woman. And Gal Gadot really surprised me in this movie. I wasn't expecting her to be as good as she was. Chris Pine is extremely, just charming in this movie. Those two have really great chemistry together.
Yeah, they work together.
Patty Jenkins did a terrific job directing this film. So, like I said, I have it as number 10.
Yeah, Chris Pine and Gadot work together very well, but I think Patty Jenkins has been a little overlooked.
Absolutely.
The direction of this film, it was so spot on, and she wasn't the writer of it as far as I know.
Let's look at IMDb right now. I have it pulled up for moments like this. Let's see. There is 5 writer credits, and she does not look to be one of them.
Yeah. So she's not a writer, but so that the last little bit, it doesn't so much is not really her blame as much as the rest of the movie is a masterpiece. the last little bit, it kind of falls apart, but it doesn't fall apart into the way where it really hurts the movie in my eyes. It falls
Yeah.
apart where we have to kind of make this a superhero where she fights a villain, and and they even do kind of twist it a little bit, so it's like, oh, it's not the guy you're thinking the whole time, it's
Yeah,
this
but
guy.
at the same time, the whole surprise ending reveal villain thing is something that I feel like is becoming more and more overused in film now.
Yeah, but I mean,
So,
had it stayed the one villain, or the at least the expected villain, it would have been a lot more boring because she could
yeah.
clearly overpower him to where
Mhm.
oh, the guy you didn't even. I will say, granted, the one thing is you don't really care about this guy
Yeah,
until you find out who he really is,
yeah.
and
See, the one thing I'll say is I don't really think this movie needed a villain that was like as equally as powerful as she was. I don't think it was about that. I think it was about her kind of understanding the human race and kind of working on that relationship more so than anything else. I don't necessarily think you needed a villain that could match her, blow for blow. I think the villain we had was fine. I think the story we had was terrific. And I mean, I'm not saying it was a bad choice to go there. I just don't think it was necessarily a needed choice.
okay, yeah, I can agree with that. It had its highlights and it had its pitfalls, but overall, I think Patty Jenkins, I think Gal Gadot, and Chris Pine, they all came together and made one of the most important superhero films easily, and
Absolutely.
probably like number 3 for DC to ever make.
As we're talking like ever with DC, it's probably it's easily it's
Or
definitely
the
in the top
DC,
five.
sorry, the DCEU.
Oh, DCEU, I think I probably put it at number two in the DCEU behind. I'm a Man of Steel fan,
Okay, yeah.
so but yeah, so you're number nine, man.
All right, my number 9, the firefighter drama Only the Brave.
Okay.
Now, this one didn't get a whole lot of recognition. It didn't get that many people even coming out to see it.
hmm
I just went off of a whim because I really like Miles Teller. Um, is that his name, Miles Teller?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. um, no, I really like Miles Teller. Ever since Whiplash, that was one of my favorite movies.
hmm
Actually, that probably was my favorite movie of the year, that year. But
Yeah.
he consistently makes me care about a character. No matter who it
hmm
is or what it is, I at least feel something for them. No matter if I don't identify with it at all. Like, Only the
hmm
Brave, I've never been in a firefighter situation. It's not something I've ever dreamt of or wanted to do. But I have I have a whole lot of respect for what they do. And
Yeah,
this one,
absolutely.
it takes you inside where they are and what they're doing and how hard they work for what they do and how important it is to them. And it's just a beautiful film, and I felt for it the whole time.
hmm
And towards the end, I'm not gonna say I cried because I have to seem manly on the podcast,
Okay,
but
that's fair.
I was close enough to crying that it was that impactful for me.
Okay, okay. For me, this movie is I don't want to say but I mean, I just it didn't affect me the way I guess it affected you or hit me the way it hit you.
Re-
I don't have really any issues with it. I just don't have anything that I'm like, oh, I really loved what they did there. It's one of those movies that to me just it felt like a very uh, above average movie, and that's not a bad thing.
Sure.
But I feel like in a year where there's so many great movies, I mean,
I kept going through
for me
this.
it didn't get up there for me enough to earn a spot on my list.
I went through this list about 5 or 6 times before I actually narrowed my 10 down.
Mhm.
And the one movie that I could not forget about was Only the Brave.
Really?
And that one, I think it just stuck with me that much. It really impacted me.
Okay.
It's surrounded with wonderful performances,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
incredible direction, and it just kind of puts you in that same shoes as what they were going through and how they felt about the wildfires that were going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a film I would recommend to anybody who hasn't seen it. It's a good
Certainly.
movie. It didn't, I guess, land with me as much as it landed with you. Um, but yeah, it's the performances are great. Miles Teller, I enjoy him as well. Jeff Bridges, I believe, is in this. Yes,
Yes, yes.
he's Jeff Bridges, and then Josh Brolin is also. I really enjoy Josh Brolin as an actor, so
Absolutely.
I
Josh
have no
Brolin
problem with
was
these
very good in this.
performances.
All right. What do you have at number 9?
At number 9, I have the Gary Oldman led film about Winston Churchill, The Darkest Hour or Darkest Hour.
Okay.
And I'm a history nerd, so I really appreciated this film. I really appreciated Gary Oldman's performance. I think it's the best or second best performance of the year, in my opinion. Um, I really love the story this movie told. I love the only thing that threw me off a little bit was the pacing at the start, but I really enjoyed everything this movie had to offer and the story and perspective it puts on Winston Churchill, because a lot of people know who Winston Churchill is, but they don't know who Winston Churchill is. And I feel this movie does a good job of showing who he was.
I don't have a lot to say about it. I have not gotten to see it yet. That's probably next up on my list. But one thing I did hear that I thought was interesting was, if you like Dunkirk, the Christopher Nolan one, go see this one because it will kind of put it all in perspective. So with that in mind, I'm very excited to go see it. I'm probably going to see it tomorrow, actually.
This is a film that definitely relates to Dunkirk. That's all I'll say about that. But yeah, I really enjoyed this film. I was I'm not, I don't want to say surprised, but I was very happy that it turned out as good as it was.
Absolutely.
So yeah. What you got as your number 8 now?
All right, for number 8, it was one of the more controversial films of the year. Some people absolutely tore it apart, and some people were in love with it. I wasn't in love with it, but enough to be number 8 on my list.
Yeah.
It is A Ghost Story, directed by David Lowery. It was one of the. It started off as a very independent film, and then it started to get a little bit of recognition as it went on. Casey Affleck and Kate Mara were both phenomenal, even though Casey Affleck doesn't say too much.
I haven't seen this movie. I actually thought you were going to say Mother for a second when you were talking about controversy and how it was received. So I was caught a little off guard when you said Ghost Story. But yeah, I haven't gotten around to seeing this movie yet. But it's definitely going to be one I check out here in the near future.
A Ghost Story, I will say, it depends on who's watching it, because the best way to say it is after about the first 10 minutes, I believe it goes 45 minutes without a word of dialogue. And there is a 9-minute scene in that 45 span where it is one shot, nothing happens except she's eating a whole pie. So I can see some people could get very bored by it, but if you start to get past that, and you kind of just give yourself the time, and you're comfortable enough where you're at watching it that you just get entirely immersed. It's just a story that's so well put together and very well written and directed, and it's something that I've never seen before. I've never seen a film like this.
Yeah, I can also say I've never seen a movie with a 45-minute pie eating scene. Is that what you said? 9-minute pie eating scene?
9-minute pie eating scene, yeah.
Or they do nothing but eat a pie. That definitely sounds different.
Yeah, it's something that's not for everybody easily. But if it's that indie idea, it's the 4:3 ratio with the rounded edges. Which I can see it being another turnoff for a lot of people, but it really does. It makes the entire experience so much more. What's the word I'm looking for? I guess
Immersive, real.
Not immersive, but just like intense, I guess,
Okay.
or emotional for you.
Okay.
But yeah, I can't recommend that one to everybody. But I will say, if any of that sounds uh, like something you would enjoy, then I definitely suggest checking it out.
I don't know now, man. I'm on the borderline now. I'm not sure. I guess I'll have to check it out because I'm not sure if I'm gonna like that or not. So for my number 8, I have The Greatest Showman starring Hugh Jackman.
Oh, okay.
I will admit this story isn't the greatest story or anything, but for me, a musical needs two things. It needs good performances and it needs good music.
Sure.
And I think this film delivers on both of those. The soundtrack, I think, is absolutely fantastic. I love Hugh Jackman. I love Zac Efron. Michelle Williams is fantastic. And the woman who plays the bearded lady is fantastic. I want to say it's Keala Seal or something.
Yeah, I believe that's right. I did.
Let me see this real quick.
I saw this film twice, and I thought it was very enjoyable. It wasn't very close to my top 10, just because the story was so flawed. But I certainly enjoyed it, and I find myself continuously returning to the soundtrack. Certain songs just stick with you, and that goes a lot into the same idea that the songs are written by the same two gentlemen, I can't think of their names, that wrote the soundtrack for La La Land. City of Stars is still one of my... City of Stars from La La Land is still one of my favorite songs for a movie ever. So I will say Hugh Jackman and Zac Efron, I both thought put on fantastic performances. Michelle Williams, this was one of her many phenomenal performances of the year.
Of course.
All the Money in the World was probably I was blown away by her performance in that. The Ridley Scott one
was amazing.
But yeah, the Greatest Showman was definitely a good one.
Yeah, Keala Settle is the name of the bearded lady.
Yes.
So I just want to say that real quick. Give her credit. She was fantastic. Yeah, I don't know if I have much more to say on that film. It's just, like I said, it fulfilled both of the things that a musical to me is supposed to fulfill. And because of that, I have it on this list.
It's not so much that it's a cinematic masterpiece or anything big and grand or beautiful, but it's just there for you to have a good time. Exactly. You'll laugh a little bit, you'll chuckle, but you'll also, the person I saw it with the second time, she told me, she was like, I think I cried that entire movie. Just because
it's definitely... There's some moments in there that are definitely a little emotional.
Absolutely, it's an emotional film. It's a very lighthearted, I think is the right word. It takes some serious issues.
It's a fun film, and people can say what they want about the actual story that this movie is based on, the actual person this movie is based off of. From what I gather, he wasn't the best person, P.T. Barnum. But I think the movie, since it gives a positive message, it's a fun movie. And then, like we've said this 50 million times already, the music is terrific and the performances are terrific. So I think it's worthy of a spot on top 15 list of the year.
Sure. All right. So for me, pretty much 7 down. They're all interchangeable. I had a very hard time narrowing this down. But at 7, I have the M. Night Shyamalan Split. With James McAvoy.
That was literally probably my number 16.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
James McAvoy put on probably my favorite performance of the year. I thought he was absolutely incredible. Because not only did he play one role phenomenally, he played 20 roles phenomenally.
Yeah.
Everything about this story to just the way it progresses, some of the cinematography in this, it's just so well done. I think it definitely deserves a spot on anyone's top 10. This was the M. Night Shyamalan return that I was hoping for. Didn't expect, but I was hoping for.
it's nice to see a good M Night Shyamalan movie again.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, I enjoyed this movie, James McAvoy. This movie, I liked James McAvoy before this. This movie made him become really one of my favorite actors. His performance, it's something that you don't see very often. The performance like that, it's a shame. It's probably not going to get the recognition that it should in award season because it came out in, I believe, January.
Yeah, it was a January.
So about a year ago. But it's a terrific film, and I really, really enjoyed seeing it.
I think James McAvoy gives the word versatile an entire movie.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
All right, what do you got?
So for my number 7, I have Baby Driver.
Oh, okay.
And this movie was arguably the hardest movie for me to rank because higher up on this list, I really, but it's a good movie. I enjoyed the way they used the music in this film. I enjoyed the performances in this film. Everybody was I think terrific. Whether it was John Hamm, Ansel Elgort, Lily James, that other guy that I'm not going to say his name.
He who shall not be named.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think it was a really, really greatly performed movie, a well-directed movie, and an enjoyably entertaining movie to watch as well.
Certainly. I don't want to say too much because, spoiler, it'll be coming up for me in a little bit. I
kind of figured it would be pretty high up on your list. So.
Yeah, but I will say Edgar Wright continues to be one of my favorite directors, whether it's Scott Pilgrim, Baby Driver, the Cronello trilogy. I mean, all of it. He's so unique in what he does. It's fantastic.
There was no film that I've seen in probably since, I don't know, since maybe the first Guardians that used music to tell the story and used music almost as a character as effectively as this movie.
Absolutely.
And I really, like I said, I loved the music in this movie. So for me, that was great. But yeah, it's my number 7. And I really enjoyed this. So
we'll get a little bit more in depth, and once it comes up on my list shortly. But for number 6 for me, this is the other This is the other Stephen It film I was alluding to earlier. The Netflix original Gerald's Game.
Okay, yeah. I have not seen that. So.
This one, I watched it just off a whim. I was like, oh, this looks interesting. Didn't know much about it. Don't know much about the book. But I was, from beginning to end, I was with the movie. I didn't, I wasn't looking at my phone. I was with the movie, and it stuck with me ever since. Thinking about it, cringing at a certain scene that I'm not going to spoil, but thinking about it right now, I'm kind of curling up into a ball. Yeah. It's gruesome. It's
Stephen King, so I figured as much.
I will say this is probably my top 5 Stephen King movies ever.
Okay.
It's up there with Misery. Well, Misery and The Shining kind of have their own tier of just being the best, but this one deserves the recognition it's not so much getting.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think I have to give it, because like I said, if it's a top tier Stephen King adaptation, I do enjoy Misery, The Shining, Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's some terrific films that have been a Stephen King adaptation, so I'll have to give that a check out, definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely worth watching. The performances, I mean, there's not that much that goes on, except for, give me 1 second, I'm having a hard time thinking of her name.
Okay.
Oh, damn it. I know her name too, and it sucks. I'll just edit this out. So the performances by Bruce Greenwood, he's not in it the entire time. It's not so much a spoiler, but just what it's about is they go away to their house, and her husband dies while being handcuffed. While as soon as he handcuffs her to the bed, so it starts off a little freaky, but as he has his heart attack, Carla Gugino, she takes this movie and makes it her own. I mean, for the majority of this movie, it's just her, and really, there's the only character that she has to go off of is a dog and the Moonlight Man, which is, it's just one of the characters in it. I'm not going to say anything about him or about about the Moonlight Man, just because if you haven't seen it yet, it's definitely one to check out. It leaves you thinking, it leaves you cringing and kind of throwing up a little bit, but all in the best way.
So I guess, my number 6 then. I have a film you already mentioned. I have War for the Planet of the Apes at number 6.
Oh, okay.
I'm a huge fan of this trilogy, and this might be my favorite movie in the trilogy. That's high praise, because I loved Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. I love what they did there.
Sure.
I will agree they didn't advertise it as what it ended up being, which is essentially a character piece on Caesar, who I guess we already gave a shout out to Andy Serkis, but he did a fantastic job playing Caesar, one of my favorite characters in the last few years in cinema. I really love the story they told with him, though.
Absolutely.
Like I said, Woody Harrelson, you said earlier, Woody Harrelson was a fantastic villain, I think.
And even Steve Zahn. Steve Zahn was phenomenal as well.
Yes. And he played the 1/8 of the funny rate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't think of his name
offhand. That was the characters in this movie. That was one of them that I thought, here we go. This character could almost be like that Jar Jar Binks type character and ruin that movie.
Sure.
He ended up not, though. He ended up being a very, very good addition to this film. And like I said, I really, really love this film, what the story it told, and I think it made a lot of fair points, about society today.
Yeah, absolutely.
That I really, really appreciated.
And I think this movie and this trilogy fits the name of giving Caesar his name.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an allusion to all of history and, to Caesar the Great.
It definitely has that grand epic type feel,
absolutely.
that you would expect to see from a 300 or something.
Sure. Yeah.
So that Caesar name, I guess, kind of, or like a gladiator. So that Caesar name definitely kind of feels fitting.
And Steve Zahn's character, like you said, it was almost too annoying, but it would just play that border where it's like, I'm laughing with you, and now you're just annoying me. He plays it right on the line, and I think it works very well to how far this society of apes has developed and come, that this weirdo ape like him has even gotten this far. But it's a phenomenal film, very enjoyable. Like I said, one of my favorite trilogies I've ever seen.
Absolutely,
it's up there with like Toy Story. I give it that high praise.
But yeah, so what you got as your number 5?
All right, getting into top 5. This is where it gets serious, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so number 5, and these ones, I was kind of sitting here. I erased and I rewrote, and I erased and I rewrote so many times.
See, the top 5 for me was the I don't want to say easy part of my list, but the easier part of my list. The back half of my list was difficult to rank.
See, these ones, I knew which movies I wanted. I just didn't know which ones to put them in. But these were pretty much 5 movies that kept me that made me inspired, that made me want to go out and grab my camera and go make a movie. It either stuck with me, or I felt for the movie, it just worked as some of the best cinema. This was definitely the year I spent the most time watching movies, just dissecting movies. And these ones are going to be ones that stick with me, not only through 2017, 18, but the next 10, 15 years down the road. That being said, number 5, Logan.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Logan is a phenomenal character piece on Wolverine. It is gritty, it's real, it's violent, but it is not Wolverine that you expect or you're used to. It shows him really develop as a human being, not so
Mhm.
much being a vicious superhero, but just as a person. He's really finding his way and
Yeah.
developing the way he does.
Yeah. This movie for me is fantastic. It will be on my list too. I can confirm that. Um, yeah, like you said, it's an interesting look at Logan, at the character of Charles Xavier. And the
Certainly.
fact that we've never seen really a superhero film like this before, is a rated R film, much like Deadpool, except unlike Deadpool, it was much more serious, much more hard hitting emotionally.
Definitely.
Um, so I really loved everything this film had to offer. For me, this was a great film.
This was easily up there with my favorite superhero movies ever made.
Yeah,
Like you said, Spider-Man 1, or Spider-Man 2. This is probably in my top 3, if not my number 1. But it's not so much that it is a superhero movie. It's just
absolutely.
a almost a western with a superhero as your lead character.
Yeah,
And that's something that's
that's
very
essentially what it is. Yeah.
that's something I don't think I've ever seen before, at least not as well done as this one. Hugh Jackman and Daphne Keane, who plays X-23.
She's fantastic in this film.
She is absolutely brilliant as a young child, doing that kind of role. She
Hmm.
really just hits it out of the park.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
probably my favorite Hugh Jackman performance, at least as
For
this
me,
character.
it's easily my favorite Hugh Jackman performance. When I said earlier that who was it? That Gary Oldman was my number two performance of the year. This was my number one performance of the year.
Okay. And I think that's rightly deserved.
You know,
He takes
um,
you beyond just what you're used to with all these cinematic universes and all these uh, wonderful, fun villains and superhero movies that everyone wants to adapt now. And he just
yeah,
he gives it to you the way it is, pretty much. The world
yeah.
that we'll never see from the superhero. Uh,
We, we, mhm. We talked about this with Spider Man. It's a more grounded superhero movie film or
absolutely.
superhero movie than what we get a lot of times. As you see Wonder Woman on my list, that's ends like a traditional superhero movie. Movies like Justice League or Guardians, those big, large, massive scale fights, massive scale implications. This is a movie that really is about three characters, and the implications that this film has are directly on that related to them and impact them, but not much else. And that grounded nature of this film, I think, makes it feel so much more, helps you feel so much more invested in these characters.
Most definitely.
Um,
All right, what are you
but
looking at for number 5?
number five, I have a film called Wonder.
Oh.
It's Have you seen it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, it's for me this film. You talked about not crying earlier. This film had me on the brink there, man. This in both like tears of joy and tears of sadness. It's a great look at bullying in schools today. At probably the most ruthless time, which is middle school
Sure.
for bullying. And then the main character, I mean, even though like with his face, it's messed up. You just He feels so relatable. This movie, um, it is a lovely movie, and one thing I will say that elevates this movie, especially above a lot of those bullying movies, because there's a decent amount of them made, is the fact that you don't just see it from his perspective. You explore the perspectives of other people around him and the impact that he has on their lives and how it affects their lives, and I really love that. So I have it at my number five movie.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes an adaptation from a book and
Yeah,
treats it like a book. It gives you insight from the sister and from him and from the parents and from the best friend. It's very nicely done, and I do appreciate it. I didn't quite have it in my top. It wasn't even one of my top of the year, but I
yeah,
will say I enjoyed it. I felt for him a lot, and this was Owen Wilson's least annoying role that I've seen him in quite a while.
Owen Wilson, man. I mean, I found him almost charming in this movie.
Yeah, he
You know,
played the role of a dad with the dad jokes, and the way he kind of has to roll with it. He does it very
Owen
well.
Wilson feels like the perfect stereotypical dad.
Absolutely.
So, and then, like I said, him, Julia Roberts. This is one of the better performances I've seen from her in a good amount of time.
Certainly.
Jacob Tremblay, I believe is the kid's name.
Yeah.
He's fantastic in this film. This isn't the first time I've seen him. This isn't the first time most people have seen him. Room, I believe he was in that.
Yes.
And then he was in another film earlier this year. I can't think of the title off the top of my head. But he was fantastic. The other main kid, his friend was well done. And then his sister was fantastic. But it's a movie that it resonates with me, and that's why I have it so high on my list. It emotionally resonated with me. I think it does a great job of really showing the best way to overcome something that is very, very serious, and that is bullying.
All right, my number 4. Oh God, this movie, I've seen it I think 4 times now, and it's still in theaters. Pixar has never failed to let me down. Cars 2, we don't talk about that one, but
we don't talk about all 3 Cars movies.
The cars aren't that bad, but that being said, Coco is easily one of my favorite Pixar movies ever made. I am so in love with this movie. The singing, the acting, the voice acting, for that matter, just everything about it. It had me the whole time. Because I went in not being entirely sure. I thought this could be a little strange look at the culture, not knowing exactly if they'd get it right. And, oh God, damn, they got it right.
Yeah. Like I said, it feels like our top 4 is going to be very similar, just maybe different rankings for certain movies. Because this is in my top 4 as well. I love this movie. This is probably one of my 2 or 3, 4 maybe favorite Pixar films.
Absolutely.
Which is high praise, because most Pixar films, with the exception of the Car films, and maybe The Good Dinosaur, are fantastic. And this is right up there with all of them. This is a great film. The fact that it's a diverse film, it's something you don't see a lot in cinema, and that's the exploration of Mexican culture. And from everything I've gathered, they did it very, very well. And how they represented it, which I appreciate. But this movie it shows what you can do with animation. Just the colors, the vibrant feel, the animation. It's all just. I love it, man. I love it.
It's so far-fetched, but the animation and the colors and the story, it makes you forget that you're watching people in the land of the dead, and you just start watching a family, and it's beautiful way of just kind of telling the story of how important it is to stay true to who you are, but don't forget about the people that matter the most, your family, that are always going to be with you. It really, I loved it way more than I expected to, and I don't have enough nice things to say about it.
This film, like I said, it fell back on a lot of familiar things in terms of what movies do, plot-wise, but it used them really well. It didn't do them in a way where you just kind of like rolled your eyes like, oh, this again. It did it very effectively.
Right. You wouldn't recognize them. You wouldn't recognize them as overused things until afterwards when you're really thinking about it.
Yeah.
Or even on a second watch.
But yeah, like I said, Pixar doesn't disappoint. And as I love this movie, like I said, it falls back on that familiar Pixar theme of family. I think that's something that's in most every Pixar movie. And then that ending, man, that ending.
Oh God.
That got me, man. That ending was absolutely gut wrenching in the best way. But it's a great movie, and like you said, there's I can't say enough about this movie. Okay, so my number 4, I have a sequel to a 1980s science fiction film. I have Blade Runner 2049. as my
Okay.
number 4 film. It's a shame it didn't perform well at the box office, but this film, man, it felt like I'm a Blade Runner fan. I like the first one a lot, and this movie felt like a sequel to the first Blade Runner.
Absolutely.
The story was fantastic. The performances were fantastic. The visuals, as with the first Blade Runner, are
Were
very, very immersive. It's very, very immersive. You feel like you're in that world. It doesn't feel necessarily as immersive as the first one. The first one, the world, the setting felt very much like a character. It doesn't feel like that as much in this film, but it's a great movie. The director Villanueva, I believe is his last name,
yes.
is he did a fantastic job. This is a fantastic movie with fantastic performances.
Absolutely. Harrison Ford, Ryan Gosling, they both kill it. Anna de
Absolutely.
Armas, who plays Joy, she's also phenomenal in
Yeah.
the very small role she plays. But I'm not gonna say too much because I'll be getting back to that one.
Okay, that's fair. But I like I said, I loved this movie. It was everything I was hoping a Blade Runner sequel would be, and then some. So I'm extremely happy with what this film gave us. So yeah, what you have as your number 3 film? Then?
So my number 3 is, fittingly enough, 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbings, Missouri.
Okay.
Now, this one, I went in not knowing too much about it. I know Frances McDermott, and she's, always been phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I am a geek for Woody Harrelson, so anything he's in, I'll pretty much
Fantastic
go
actor.
see it. Yeah. But this one blew me out of the water. I didn't know that I was going to love it nearly as much as I did. It's funny. It's a very dark humor, though, about very serious issues, and it's handled perfectly. Um, all the performances, I can't name one person that I didn't think was wonderful.
Yeah.
Sam Rockwell is getting the recognition he deserves for his role as Dixon. And I mean, the performances, the direction, the story, it all comes together, and I just think it's nearly a perfect film.
No, I this is another one of those films that just missed the cut for me. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the performances. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't really have many bad things to say about this film. It's just it didn't some of the stuff just didn't land with me as well as it landed, I guess, with you.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
but
Um,
I like I said, I thoroughly enjoyed this film. And like I said, it's deserving of everything it's getting. The performances in it are fantastic. The direction is fantastic. Um, the I don't want to say quirkiness of this film. I don't know if that's the right word. Um,
it's not the wrong word. Quirkiness isn't the
yeah,
wrong word.
um, I really enjoyed that about it. So it's definitely a film that people should go check out.
Yeah, I will say it's not for everybody. If you don't like humor that's it feels very off the cuff. It's almost dry, but not to the point where it just slides
Yeah,
by. There are a few lines that I really was doubled over laughing. I don't know if how much of that was because it was just relief to laugh at after a very serious moment, or
mm-hmm.
how much of it was just genuinely funny.
Yeah,
Uh, there's a flashback sequence. I'll mention this. There's a flashback sequence where it's Frances McDermott's character, her son, and her daughter. They're all in the kitchen, and the daughter makes a comment on, "I hope I get raped on the way home," and Frances McDermott is just sitting there reflecting on that, and then the son comes out with a line. He
yeah.
said, "Stop being such a cunt." She said, "We don't use that." We said, "There are no cunts in this house," and he then says, "What are you both gonna move out?" And I thought that was one of the funniest lines from a movie this year. I was genuinely laughing.
That had me dying when I saw it. So
But no, it's just that kind of humor. It's a little, not so much raunchy, but just a little offbeat.
yeah,
It's
that's a good way to describe it. I think.
it's phenomenal, and Peter Dinklage, he has a very small role, but I really love the way they used him as well.
Yeah. Peter Dinklage is He's one of my favorite actors.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, my number three film is Dunkirk.
Oh, okay.
So this is for me a film. Uh, Christopher Nolan's job directing this film is fantastic. The way it's shot, um, the score. Hans Zimmer, I believe, did the score.
Yes.
It's all just, you get so immersed in this movie. You feel like you're there. I like I said, I really enjoyed this film from one of the best directors in the game today, if not the best. So
Yeah, absolutely. Everything about it is just, it's very well done. The reason that it didn't make mine was with some of the character pieces and some of the dramas I saw this year, it just barely missed. It just didn't have the emotional toll I was hoping for.
mm-hmm.
But that's not what he was going for. I respect him for that. Going not so much for the character, just for the timeline of everything. It works very well. I just couldn't quite put it there. I think Nolan has done better.
Yeah, I'm not going to say this is Christopher Nolan's best film. That would be a difficult rank list if I had to do it. Because he's directed so many great films, but I don't know. I feel what separates this for me from those other dramas is, I mean, yeah, the characters and the stories may not be as strong, but it is so immersive that I mean, I still find myself invested in those characters and in those stories because of just how immersed I am in the film, in the location, and it's a direct correlation to the direction of this film.
And I will say Tom Hardy deserves more credit than he has gotten for this role. He was absolutely fantastic as the pilot.
Tom Hardy's one of the best directors, one of the best actors on the planet. So.
And he's so phenomenal in almost all of his roles, and
Absolutely.
yet still doesn't get the credit he usually deserves. There have been exceptions to both his performances and to the credit, but he's still absolutely fantastic. Now after mentioning that being your number 3, I have a question.
Okay.
Now, I believe Blade Runner was your number 5, correct?
Number 4.
Number 4. Okay, so 4 and 3. Both scores were done by Hans Zimmer.
You can ask me which one's better.
Which one did you think was a better scored film?
I'm gonna say Dunkirk.
You would say Dunkirk, okay.
Just because, like I said, I think the music is so important to the immersion factor that I feel with this film, to the intensity I feel in this film. And that's not to knock his score in Blade Runner because it's fantastic as well. But this might have been the best scored movie of the year for me.
See,
or it's definitely up there.
I have to say, I most certainly do agree with you that Dunkirk relied so much. It was not a dialogue-based film. It was not a character-based film. It was on the war, and it was on the reality of it. And without a score that was as phenomenal as what Hans Zimmer did for Dunkirk, it would not have nearly been as well done of a film.
Yeah, I feel you can make the argument that the score is more important to this film than some of the performances.
Most certainly.
So this score to me, like I said, it's one of the best, if not the best, of the year.
And I want to say, just a mini shout out, but Harry Styles. I kind of laughed when I figured out it was actually him.
I mean, I was surprised that he gave that type of performance. I didn't know he could do that.
Yeah, I didn't see that in him. I didn't see it in him, and I was very impressed by him. I'll say that.
Yeah, no, I will say that. I was pleasantly surprised by what he had to offer. So what you got as your number 2 film?
All right, number 2 and number 1, they were really. I don't know which to pick. Even right now as I'm talking, I'm thinking about switching them back and forth.
Well, the clock's running, man.
God! All right, you gotta go number 2, the Edgar Wright masterpiece, Baby Driver.
Okay, I expected this to be your number 1. I'm not gonna lie.
You know what? I couldn't pick it. Like it was my number 2 and my number 1 are both in my eyes cinematic masterpieces. They're beautifully done. They're just fantastic, yet they're so opposite. But Baby Driver, Ansel Elgort, Kevin. Oh shoot, I should have said his name. Kevin Spacey, or the one who shall not be named. But despite what he's done, I'm not saying anything about that. But his performance solely in Baby Driver was fantastic. Lily James, I mean, absolutely everybody in this movie. Jamie Foxx was absolutely incredible. John Hamm, it's the kind of movie that I left smiling. Like, I can't tell you the last time I left a movie just smiling ear to ear, snapping my fingers to a song. And this movie has really become almost of cult status to my group of friends. We're always making jokes. We're quoting the movie. We listen to the soundtrack on our phones no matter what.
It's a great soundtrack, yeah.
I mean, everything about this movie, it works so well. And I've never been one for an action film. I've never been somebody for those kind of movies. But this one was so far different than... It didn't take itself seriously, but at the same time, there are certain scenes where you really feel it snap from, oh, this is a lighthearted comedy about a serious thing, to, holy shit, this is serious.
You're not going to get any arguments from me, man. Like I said, I had this movie on my list for a reason. I enjoyed everything this film had to offer. I enjoyed the music. I enjoyed the acting, the directing, the action. Like I said, I enjoyed everything this film had to offer.
For Edgar Wright, I will say this is not his best if you're looking at his entire scheme of things, but it is for what it is in, his first real American action film.
Yeah.
There are no flaws to this movie. The only thing being the love story was a little wishy-washy. But I will say, in the grand scheme of it, it works out so well. The music, the acting, the directing, just everything about this movie, the stunts for that matter, it's all absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely. Once again, you're not going to hear any arguments from me. So.
All right, what do you got sitting at number 2?
It's a film you already said. You had, I believe, at number 4, Coco.
Absolutely.
The Pixar movie.
Yeah.
And like I said, my number 1 was easy. My number 2 was fairly easy as well. For me, there was 2 films this year that were a cut above the rest, and this is one of them. I don't care if it's animated. It's for me, it's almost perfect. I'm not going to say it's perfect because there's no such thing as a perfect movie, but I have zero complaints whatsoever with this movie.
Yeah, you're not going to hear me. You're not going to hear me debating that at all.
Yeah.
Coco blew me out of the water. It's sweet, it's charming, but it's also sad, and it has its serious notes. It's kind of just a bunch of ingredients put into the best stew you've ever tasted. It's just so well done. And Pixar, per usual, hit it not only out of the ballpark, but out of the entire league, and it's floating somewhere near the moon.
Absolutely not. This film, it's a great movie. There's no way around it for me. It's funny though. My top 2 movies, man, they're the 2 movies that probably made me cry this year that I saw. So,
interesting.
What?
I said interesting.
Yeah. So no, that's I think for me these 2 movies, this movie as well as my number 1, resonated with me emotionally in a way that the other films didn't necessarily, and that's why I have them as high as I do.
Absolutely. I think it's interesting. We had a lot of the same movies, just in different places.
Yeah.
So, my number 1, yeah, it's already been mentioned, but I don't think you gave it the credit it deserves. Blade Runner 2049.
Okay, yeah.
I
have it at number 4. I feel like that's pretty solid credit, man.
For what it was, I just feel that it was so far above everything else that came out. This and Baby Driver were the 2 that I saw them both, and I was like, I don't know which one I liked more. They're so polar opposite, but at the same time, they are just brilliantly directed.
Mm-hmm.
The acting's phenomenal. Ryan Gosling in this film delivers probably my favorite performance. Maybe La La Land, that was a very good performance, but I don't think it touches this.
Yeah.
We already mentioned all Harrison Ford, Ana de Armas, but this, as long as a film as this was, it's not for everyone. But very few times will I see a movie and not at least check my watch or check my phone for the time, or at least think about, hey, this is a little long. This movie, there was one brief, probably 5 minute span halfway through where I was like, hey, this has been a little while now, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And
For me, the beginning of this movie dragged a little bit. The first, I say, 30 minutes maybe.
yeah,
But
absolutely.
that's
But once I
that,
got
that's
once I got past that certain like the little gap where I was just I'm not so sure or not so much sure, but it's a little bit lengthy at this point. I
yeah,
really just I hit the I got re-immersed, and it just was a masterpiece. The music, the best cinematography. I know it isn't. It's not technically the best cinematography in a film, but for
hmm
me, it was my personal favorite. Each shot and each frame could be taken a screenshot of and framed in someone's house, and nobody would be like, that's an ugly shot. Each one
yeah,
is beautifully constructed. Time was taken just for that shot, and you really feel like he didn't care about anything except for this film.
yeah. What I will say is the reason this film isn't higher up on my list because I truly feel this film had potential to be, my number two film, even maybe challenge for my number one spot. But there was a few problems I had with this movie. Obviously, I mentioned it started out a little slow for me after we saw Dave Bautista because Dave Bautista is fantastic. Um, it started out a little slow for me. I didn't necessarily like the fact that I felt like there was certain scenes that weren't necessary, that were only in there to plant the possibility of a sequel. Um, and there was I'm not a huge Jared Leto fan as an actor. And I didn't like the villain in this movie, or his villain at least.
See, I have to
So
say, I strongly disagree with that.
Jared Leto
Because,
point.
yeah, the Jared Leto point. Because he has played in the past nothing but weird ass roles. He does, but he's used to those weird roles. Suicide Squad, Mr. Nobody. He really just doesn't play ordinary roles. And I think as, the villain of this piece, he wasn't normal. And you tell it was just really freaky to watch him. And,
Yeah, and I will say this: I don't think it's as much him in this movie as it is the way that the villain was written into the story. Um,
I think
but
that's interesting because I thought the villain. I mean, I've heard people complain about the villain, but I really did enjoy him.
yeah, I liked the other villain, the female villain. I thought she was. I really liked what she did. But I wasn't a huge fan of his villain. Um, but yeah, those are my few complaints. I think those things are what held it back from being in my top in discussion for being in my top two with these other two films.
Absolutely. But no, I haven't seen a movie that really left me silent through the credits. I mean, my friends were over there. They're like, "Is he okay? Did he like the movie?" And they came over. They're like, "Are you all right?" And I was like, "That was the best movie that I have seen in a long time." I was
Yeah,
just absolutely taken aback, and I was in Los Angeles in the year 2049. Just absolutely blown away.
yeah,
All right, but I'll
yeah.
I'll stop going on and on about how fantastic it was, and I'll let you get to your number one.
Okay, my number one. It's a film you already mentioned. I believe it was in your top five, but I'll say this: I don't think you gave it the shine it deserved. Um, and that's Logan. For me, this is clear and away the best movie of the year. It's not even for me a competition. Everything about this movie worked for me. Um, like I said, it hits hard emotionally. I saw this film 3 times in theaters, and I've probably seen it another 4 or 5 times since. And every time I see it, man, I get choked up at the end of that movie.
Absolutely.
I could go on about this film all day and just how much I love different things. We were talking about earlier. The one person I feel like we didn't give enough love to is Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier.
Sure.
This might be the of his career, and it's been a great career.
Absolutely, Logan. Like I said, my top 5, I didn't really have a rhyme or reason for them. They all, either one I could have put at number 1 and felt just as good about it. Hugh Jackman really brings home his career as the Wolverine, and just ends it on the perfect note of it's just kind of hitting a silent note of somber but absolutely badass.
Yeah, no, I think I'm not gonna lie. The fact that this film resonated with me so much has absolutely everything to do with the fact that Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman have played those roles really for since 2000. So pretty much.
Yeah, I was gonna say pretty much
not
our
all
whole
my
life,
life, but all of what I can remember my life being.
Yeah, definitely.
All that I can remember of my life. And
Certainly.
yeah, I hope they both stay done with the X-Men franchise. Not because I wouldn't want to see him back, but because this to me is you can't get a better send off than what those two got in this film. So
yeah, there's almost no way to top it.
I could rave about this film all day.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, it's probably my favorite superhero film to ever come out.
This is one of my favorite films, not just of the year, but I think one of my favorite films of all time. I mean that in total sincerity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's entirely justified. So there you have it. Both of our top 15 lists. This is something we're going to hopefully start doing a little bit more often. But any closing remarks?
I'll just say this was really a great year with a lot of great movies. And we did 15 because we couldn't do 10, but we probably could have done 20 or 25 if we really wanted to.
Absolutely.
It was that great of a year for movies, for the most part. But yeah, no, it was a great year for films, and I'm happy I got to see some of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly leaves me excited for what is in stock for 2018.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got some sequels coming out. We got some expansions, and we're already off to a good start with a few flicks that I've heard about. But on that note, I believe it is time to call it a night, a day, whatever time it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
All right. Good talking to you, sir.
Absolutely, man.
And hopefully we can do this again soon.